September 10th, 2001, I received a very important letter. I've been working for 2 years with my local Red Cross affiliate to train and become certified to respond to national disasters anywhere in U.S. territory. And on September 10th, 2001, that letter came. And I was very proud to know that I had reached that achievement. But I also took it in stride because my life was in a very good place. I had an excellent career. I was a bridge engineer with the state of Ohio. I was inspecting about 1,400 bridges a year. And as part of that work, I got to make decisions. I had a budget. I got to decide which bridges were repaired, which were replaced. And I got to live in a world that I refer to as the world of triangles, circles, and squares, where all answers come from formulas. And everything's real easy to kind of open a book and find the answer. On the other hand, my family life was doing very well too. I had 2 children. My oldest, Audrey, was 2. My only son at the time, Jackson, was 6 months. And every day there was a new development. As all parents know, there's a push-up, they roll over, there's something new every day. And at that point, in all honesty, the hardest part of my life was just getting up and going to work and knowing that I was going to miss something that day that the kids did while I was gone. So the next day, as I sat with my coworkers and we watched the events unfold with the country, we took it all in, Flight 93, the Pentagon, the Twin Towers, and I just remember thinking, am I going to get that call? And once they knew the planes were pretty much accounted for, they sent us home. And the whole way home, I kept thinking, when am I going to get that call? And the call didn't come. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. And I kind of resolved myself to the fact that all the training and hard work that I put in up to that point just wasn't meant to be used for this particular tragedy. And the universe knows best, and I have to trust in that, is the simple answer. So I did, and I kind of resolved and made peace with that. But then in the first week of January, the call did come. And I went home, and I talked to my wife, and all I knew were 3 things. I had to commit to 3 weeks. I had to commit to 12 to 16-hour days without a day off. And I had to leave the next morning first flight out. So I went home and I told my wife the details, and she said, go. No question, just go. So as the plane approached New York, and we were circling over Manhattan towards LaGuardia, everyone was looking out the windows, and I peeked to see what had grabbed all their attention. And Ground Zero was no longer a burning pile. It was a burning pit. Even in January, it was still smoking. You could see it from the air. And the smoke was still going across parts of Manhattan. I had a realization that maybe I had bitten off more than I could chew, for those of you familiar with that expression, and I started to panic. And the best way I can describe the panic I experienced was witnessing my daughter being born. It was a very similar kind of panic, and it just had to play out. I didn't know what to do. So I forced myself to get off the plane. I made it to my hotel, and the way I got instructions was by phone. The Red Cross gave you a 1-800 number, and you call, get instructions, you complete that task. It was almost like a scavenger hunt. You get another 1-800 number and follow those instructions to another 1-800 number. So I was playing that game on the day that I arrived. I did a dry run because I knew I was going to have to report to headquarters in Brooklyn the next day. I'd never been on a subway. I didn't know anything about New York. So I got my subway pass and did a dry run to Red Cross headquarters. So when I arrived at headquarters the next day, Red Cross headquarters in Brooklyn, what I had anticipated was a lot different than what I experienced. I kind of envisioned this team effort, everyone locked in arms, working together. And what I found was people who were very tired, grumpy, unpleasant, unfriendly, short, even nasty. And there were new volunteers coming in, old volunteers going out. This happened, as you can imagine, if everyone's coming in 3-week cycles, it's pretty chaotic. And so in the midst of all that chaos, I found out that my task was going to be to load and unload trucks in New Jersey at a warehouse. And then I breathed kind of a sigh of relief because I knew I wouldn't have to think. I could do that. I just needed to use my big shoulders and my brawn, put the boxes away, do what I was told, go home, rinse, repeat, get through the 3 weeks, and I could get home. While I was standing in line, I made the mistake of opening my big mouth, which I often do, and I was explaining some of my career back home. And a woman behind the desk who was giving people assignments heard my story and said, "Mr. Lightle, bring me your paperwork. You are not going to New Jersey." And that feeling of panic set in again. My palms started to sweat. And I asked her, I said, "Well, what do you have in mind?" And she said, "You said you do inventory?" And I said, "That's right, for 1,400 bridges every year." She said, "We're going to put you in our non-expendable equipment office. What they do is they keep track of everything that you can't throw away. So if it's not a paper towel, we have to track it. And we've lost a lot of stuff. And people want their stuff back, and we can't find it. And we need you to go find it." So my comfort level went back up. I'm back in the world of triangles, circles, and squares and problem solving, and I'm happy because I can do that. I get to play detective. I can track this stuff down. That's in my wheelhouse. I'm back in business. They didn't delay. They handed me a subway pass, a map, told me about a problem at a service center on Liberty Street, and sent me on my way. There was no training period, no break-in period, and no partner. So I jumped on the subway, went to where I was instructed on Liberty Street. When I came up out of the subway, there were 2 semi-trucks backed up to the service center, and there's the people from each truck were speaking different foreign languages, but they were both trying to load the same equipment into their truck. As you can imagine, there's a lot of cursing. I thought a fight was going to break out. I was just trying to play mediator. I'm a fairly big guy. Sometimes I was just kind of putting myself in between people. It really wasn't what I had anticipated. And in the middle of all this, I kind of sensed that something wasn't quite right. And when I turned around, there was a woman standing, what I would call in my personal space, directly behind me. And so all I remember about this woman, honestly, is her eyes. I remember looking into her eyes. And I refer to them now as kind of Santa Claus eyes. They had the blue-eyed twinkle. And she started peppering me with questions, just right out of the blue. Are you married? Do you have a job? Do you have kids? Where are you from? And she went through this whole gambit, and I'm trying to answer them in a shotgun manner, and finally I just said, "Ma'am, how can I help you?" And I said, "I'm here to do this task for the service center. What can I do for you?" And she said, "Well, you can answer my question." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, I thought I did." And she said, "No, the question I really want to ask you is, if you're so happy and you love your job and you love your wife and you love your children and you have such a good career, why would you drop all that and just jump on a plane with no notice and come here to New York where no one would lift a finger to help you if for any reason? Why would you do that?" And I was a little perplexed. And she caught me off guard. That's not what I expected either. And I said, "Well, I guess I don't look at it that way. I put in all this time and effort to train to do this type of work, to help others when things are at their worst. And I honestly believe that most people want to." I said, "There are people sending teddy bears and cards, kids at school. They're filling up warehouses because they don't know how to express their desire to help in a productive way. So they're doing the best thing they can think of. But I have the training. I've been trained by the Red Cross to do these tasks, and that's why I'm here." She kind of stepped back from me, and then she leaned in, and she threw her arms around me. And I remember I don't remember feeling her hair or her mouth, but I remember her in my ear saying, "I didn't think there were people in the world like you anymore. I didn't think people like you existed anymore." And I wanted to make eye contact with her and thank her for her words of encouragement, but she turned in a way that I couldn't make eye contact with her and just walked away. And she was gone. And I was left standing there in the middle of people cussing at each other in 3 or 4 languages I didn't understand. But I thought, you know what? I can do this. You know, these words of encouragement from a stranger, that's what I needed in this instant, and I can do this. And we got it straightened out. We got the right equipment on the right trucks. We got everybody to hold hands and make up to a degree, and we got everybody on their way. I got back to Red Cross headquarters. I told them what had happened. And she said, "Well, I hate to ask too much from you, but would you be willing to take another assignment?" And I said, "Sure." And I said, "What is it?" She says, "Well, there's important work going on over at the Fresh Kills landfill." For those of you not familiar with that, Fresh Kills landfill is on Staten Island, and that's where they were taking all the debris from Ground Zero and sorting through it. And none of the Red Cross volunteers wanted to go there because, honestly, it was just a terrible place. And they had a police officer from Cleveland willing to go, but they wouldn't send anyone alone. So I think they just sent the 2 biggest corn-fed Ohio guys they could find. And we got paired up and put in a car and sent to Staten Island. When I got there, even as a civil engineer, I've seen a lot of big projects. I've seen the Maumee River Bridge built in Toledo. I've seen a lot of neat stuff, but I wasn't prepared for the way they were conducting operations at Fresh Kills landfill. That wasn't training I'd ever received before, and it certainly wasn't circles, triangles, or squares. They were bringing in material on barges. They were putting it on conveyor belts. The material was going up the conveyor belts. Staten Island Fresh Kills landfill is basically a mountain of trash. And everything's at the top, and you have to drive up to the top, and the conveyors go up to the top. So they would take giant magnets, pull out the structural steel, put the other material on the belts. They would go up the hill, they drop through a sieve. People would be there sorting where that sieve was, to the next sieve or the smaller size. People sorting through that until you got to the top. Went through kind of the tented area where the very small, fine things were sorted. And I know when we got up to that point at the very top, and the officer and I stepped out in our Red Cross gear, he was automatically accepted into kind of the club. They knew we were coming, and with him being a police officer, most of the people at Fresh Kills were FBI, DEA, CIA, people of that nature, so that's why they picked him. He was kind of part of that brotherhood, so to speak, or that club. And that automatically painted me as the Red Cross guy. The people assumed that I was the psychologist or psychiatrist or the mental health worker. So when I stepped out of the car, not knowing what to expect, I looked down at the ground, and when I put my foot down, I noticed there were bubbles coming up out of the soil. And it was methane gas, off-gassing from old trash. And I just remember thinking, how could we be carrying out such a sacred duty to our fallen in such an unsacred place? And the fellow who was showing us around, we were sent there to try to find a piece of equipment, and he was trying to help us find it. And we came across an area, and it was 8 acres of rescue vehicles from Ground Zero that they had transported there. And they were stacked 10 and 12 high. And I thought they had processed them and smashed them like at a junkyard, and those were the processed ones they had gone through. And he said, "Oh no, those came in that way. We'll get to those last because the fellas in there aren't going anywhere." And that's kind of a gut punch for somebody trained to work in the world of triangles, circles, and squares. And so I was already shook. We walked back to this place where they served lunch, and they had chefs coming in from all over Manhattan fixing really good food for the people doing this work. And the reason they were so grumpy, and the reason they were so aggravated, and the reason they were so unpleasant is many, if not most, had been there since the first day. And it was now January.
2002.
They wouldn't leave their post. And they invite us in to have lunch with them, and one by one, day after day, someone would pull me aside, and all they wanted was to tell their story, their concerns, to someone who would honor it and respect it, give it the respect it deserved. No, it would go no further. As an engineer, I'm trained to offer solutions, and these weren't being solicited. They just wanted big, strong shoulders to lean on, and I improvised. I put my training aside, and that's what I did. And so I walked away from that realizing that I can't fix everything. I can't change human nature. I don't have any control over those type of things. I accept that. But I am convinced, and I have witnessed, that when we act in common purpose for a common good, that we can change the human condition.